Hi everybody, I'm Ryan, and today we're going to talk about Blue Belcher in Modern, and we're going to do a big deep dive on it because over the course of the past week, we've done a deck tech, we've done a sideboard guide, we've done flex slots and different builds of the deck. We've talked about tips, tricks, and nuances, so I want to combine them all into one giant comprehensive deep dive. Enjoy. So this is Belcher in Modern. What this deck is effectively attempting to do is it's a one-card combo. It's trying to play Goblin Charbelcher, which is a 4-mana artifact where you can pay 3 mana, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a land card. This artifact deals damage equal to the number of non-land cards revealed this way to any target. If the revealed land card was a mountain, this artifact deals double that damage instead. Put the revealed cards on bottom of the library in a random order. So essentially you activate this, we have no lands in our deck, we flip over our entire deck, deal like 40 damage to the opponent and win the game. One card combo. Simple as that, though we have some deck building restrictions in that we can't really play lands, except for this mountain in the sideboard, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But there's a lot of cards that are lands on the opposite side. So our spells on the front side, lands on opposite side, and we can play it as a land. But for purposes of Goblin Charbelcher, it is a spell. So we have like Seagate Restoration, Suppression Ray, Between Veil, Hydroelectric Specimen, Sink into Stupor, Jwari Disruption. All of these cards are effectively lands for us because on the opposite side, we can just play them as a land. Some of them are fine spells like Jwari Disruption, Sink into Stupor. Casting them on the front side are both totally fine. But most of them, if we are casting the spell, then something's gone horribly wrong. But while I have said that these most of the time are lands, again, we can use them as spells as well. So Jwari Disruption, 2 mana instant, counter target spell unless the controller pays 1. It's like decent card, be able to just have counter magic. Sink into Stupor is a 3 mana instant, return target spell or non-land permanent opponent controls to its owner's hand. Hydroelectric Specimen is a 3 mana 1/4 with flash. When this creature enters, you may change the target of instant or sorcery spell with a single target to this creature. So bad. Suppression Ray, 5 mana sorcery, tap all creatures target player controls. You pay any amount of energy. If you do, choose up to that many creatures tap this way, put a stun counter on each of them. We don't produce energy. Between Veil, I think it's how you pronounce that, is a 2 mana instant. Creatures your opponent control get -2/-0 till end of turn. And Seagate Restoration, which is a 7 mana sorcery. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand +1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. We might actually cast that as well. But there's very little chance for casting Between Veil, almost 0 for Suppression Ray, almost 0 for Hydroelectric Specimen. We are playing them as lands. Notice some of these lands, you can pay 3 mana to have it enter untapped. In fact, a majority of them you can. But as far as Goblin Charbelcher is concerned, these are spells. So the rest of the deck is centered entirely around either protecting Goblin Charbelcher or tutoring it out or digging for it or digging for protection or ramping it out. Like with Lotus Bloom. Lotus Bloom is a not even 0 mana, a 0 cost artifact that has suspend 3 for 0 mana, which means we exile it for 0 mana with 3 suspend counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to remove one of those time counters. And when the last one is removed, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. And we can tap it and sacrifice it to add 3 mana of any one color. So this allowed us to do this on turn 1 and be able to kind of ramp out the Goblin Charbelcher. There's also some combos with Tameshi, which is the last thing we're going to talk about here. We can dig for all of these cards with Thundertrap Trainer and Falaji Archaeologist. Thundertrap Trainer is a 2 mana 1/2 with Offspring for 4, so you can pass for 6 mana to have 2 of these enter the battlefield, the second one being a 1/1. When this creature enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library and reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. So this allows us to essentially tutor our whole deck, besides like Tameshi, I guess, or Falaji Archaeologist or other Thundertrap Trainers. So it allows us to dig to Goblin Charbelcher or protection or seek lands. Falaji Archaeologist is really similar as well. It's a 2 mana 0/3. When this creature enters, mill 3 cards, then put a non-creature, non-land card from among the mill cards this way into your hand. If you don't, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So it's really relevant these effects are creatures and we don't just want to play Impulse, because with Flare of Denial is a 3 mana instant. You may sacrifice a non-token blue creature rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Counter target spell. Flare of Denial allows us to be able to counter spells on our turn, not like with Force of Negation, if we have Thundertrap Trainer or Falaji Archaeologist on the battlefield. So it allows us to protect that Goblin Charbelcher, which is super, super relevant. Similarly, we get to play Disrupting Shoal, which is 2 mana and X. You may exile a blue card with mana value X from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost, and counter target spell if mana value is X, which this counterspell is horrible, but it can be 0 mana, and we have so many blue cards that we just don't give a crap about, and it allows us to interact with our opponent while Goblin Charbelcher is on the stack, and we can kind of protect that combo for 0 mana. Some other ways to interact with our opponent, we're playing Stern Scolding. It's just a very good counterspell at the moment. 1 mana instant counter target creature spell with power toughness 2 or less. There's a lot of cards like that. And then Spell Snare, most cards are 2 mana. Playing 3 Spell Snare is a 1 mana instant counter target spell with mana value 2. And most things are mana value 2. We can also tutor up Goblin Charbelcher, essentially Goblin Charbelcher 5 through 8 with War of Invention. It's a 3 blue and X with Improvise, where artifacts can help cast a spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1, which doesn't really matter in this deck. But you can search your library for an artifact card with mana value X or less, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle, which is also a little relevant that you can just pay 3 mana and grab a Lotus Bloom at instant speed, and so you have extra mana when you untap, or just be able to grab that Goblin Charbelcher. Then we have Tameshi, which is one of the more confusing parts of this deck. It's a 3 mana 2/3. Whenever one or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, and you can pay white and X to return a land you control to its owner's hand, return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. So the combo is you have a bunch of lands, whatever. You have a Lotus Bloom, either on the battlefield or in the graveyard, whatever. You can pay a white, which you get with Suppression Rate or with Lotus Bloom, to return a land to your hand, return Lotus Bloom to the battlefield, make mana with Lotus Bloom, return a land to your hand, draw a card relevantly, draw a card, return Lotus Bloom to the battlefield, make mana, return a land to your hand, draw a card, return Lotus Bloom to the battlefield, and you end up profiting a large amount of mana and effectively digging for Philology Archaeologist, Thundertrap Trainer, War of Invention, Goblin Charbelcher, whatever, hitting one of those things finally, and then being able to use that mana to play Goblin Charbelcher and activate it. It's a very powerful deck and very good at supporting, the 1-card combo. As far as the sideboard goes, Portable Hole is just a solid removal that we can tutor with War of Invention, either for creatures or like hate cards for Stony Silence or whatever. Consign to Memory is very good against Eldrazi, 1 mana instant counter target triggered ability or colorless spell. Decent against Storm and kind of the mirror a little bit as well. Into the Flood Maw is a 1 mana instant. Gift a tapped fish, return target creature and opponent controls to its owner's hand. If the gifts were promised, instead return target non-land permanent opponent controls to its owner's hand. This is good against Stony Silence and whatnot. Stern Scolding we've already talked about. Force of Negation, very good against other combo decks. If you plan on fighting a counter war or something, or fighting over War of Invention during your opponent's turn, it's a 3 mana instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. And it counters target non-creature spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. Again, good against other combo decks, good against fighting counter wars, at least not on your turn. You can play up to 3 Harbinger of the Seas. It is a 3 mana 2/2 non-basic lands or islands. This is a good Blood Moon effect against decks that rely on, non-basic lands or have lands that do really scary things like Eldrazi or Amulet Titan or something. Playing a single mountain, because a lot of the cheap ways to interact with this deck are destroying our lands, because we aren't playing any basics. Cards like White Orchid Phantom or like Ghost Quarter are very good against us, and so against those decks we side in a mountain, and we only side in one so we can grab it when they Ghost Quarter us or White Orchid Phantom us, and it's a mountain so that it deals double damage with Goblin Charbelcher, so there's just a very, very, very small chance that the mountain ruins our Goblin Charbelcher activation. And then we're playing 2 Torpor Orb, 2 mana artifact. Creatures entering don't cause abilities to trigger. It's relevant that this stops Archaeologist and Thundertrap Trainer, but against the decks we're siding Torpor Orb in against, it is just totally worth it. So this is Mono Blue Belcher. As far as the sideboard goes, we're playing Portable Hole just as a removal spell for small things that can be tutored up with War of Invention. For Consign to Memory against like Storm and Eldrazi and stuff like that. Into the Flood Maw to remove problematic permanents that may be hating us out, like Stony Silence pops into my head immediately. Stern Scolding, good against the small creatures. Force of Negation against other combo decks. Harbinger of the Seas are good against the decks that rely on their lands to do the powerful thing in their deck, like Amulet or Eldrazi or something like that. Mountain for the Ghost Quarter decks, and then Torpor Orb for decks that rely on creatures entering the battlefield. That being said, the most popular deck in Modern is Boros Energy. Against Boros Energy, Portable Hole is really solid. So is Stern Scolding. Both of these things can help answer the creatures. Into the Floodmaw needs to come in. It can kind of stop the aggro, but also it can return things like Stony Silence and hate cards and stuff. And then we can take out these Flare of Denials. They don't really have instant speed interaction to us. They're not a counterspell deck. We don't need to protect it instant speed. And so this on my sideboard against Boros Energy. Next up is Eldrazi. Against Eldrazi, we're bringing in these Consigned to Memories for sure. Whoops. Harbinger of the Seas, also very, very good because it can kind of slow them down and choke them on colors and stuff. And then the Mountain needs to come in as well because they're a Ghost Quarter deck and we can't have them slowing us down if they have a Sowing Mica Spawn hand. We're going to be taking out Disrupting Shoal. It's just like really hard to line it up properly against their big creatures. It's kind of cute against their early rampers, but I don't think it's good enough. And then similarly, as far as the counter magic goes, there's no need for us to like protect it instant speed like this. There's just literally no need. So this on my sideboard against Eldrazi. The third most popular deck in Modern is Dimir Murktide. Against Dimir Murktide, I'm a fan of Portable Hole. Being able to take out the Psychic Frog or Tommy or Orcish Bowmaster is all pretty important. And similar thing with Stern Scolding. Unfortunately, it's a pretty horrible matchup. So we're conceding to it a little bit. But I think that we kind of have to do a lot of maneuvering, and it isn't necessarily just about doing it very, very fast. So shaving on Lotus Bloom is totally fine. Shaving on Tameshi is totally fine. We'll eventually dig to it. And this time a sideboard against Murktide. The fourth most popular deck is Ruby Storm. Against Ruby Storm, I'm a fan of the Consigns. You can counter the Storm Trigger, which is pretty nice. Portable Hole, also really good against either of the combo pieces. Force Negation can kind of slow down their combo as well, which is super, super nice. Then Into the Floodmaw can like return their thing in response to the first spell they cast, which is also super cool. Gonna be shaving on Stern Scolding. It can hit Ral, but meh. And unfortunately against this deck, it is about going super fast, so we're keeping the Lotus Blooms in. But because it's about speed, we're rarely going to use the Tameshi combo. So we're going to shave 2 Tameshis. And then some of this consistency, because when we're going for speed, we do need to shave consistencies. So this is how I'm a sideboard against Ruby Storm. Next up, the fifth most popular deck is Amulet Titan. Against Amulet Titan, Portable Hole is decent to be able to answer the Amulet. Consign to Memory is just another counterspell for Amulet, but also it does a pretty good job countering those triggered abilities and stuff. Force Negation can be cute against their like Scape Shift or them just casting Amulet of Vigor. And then Harbinger of the Seas is actually just insane against their lands, and then Torpor Orb counters their entire Primeval Titan combo. We're going to be taking out Stern Scolding and Spell Snare just because it doesn't necessarily do anything. They are not interacting at instant speed, so we can cut out the Flare of Denials. And then this matchup genuinely is about speed, and so we're going to shave a few Thundertrap Trainers, and this on a sideboard against Amulet Titan. The sixth most popular deck is the Mirror Match. In the Mirror, bring in Force Negation so we can stop them from doing their thing. Consign to Memory can stop them from just hard casting Belcher and force them to Whir of Invention it. And we can cut the Stern Scolding, obviously, because it's not good. And it's actually very hard for Disrupting Shoal to pair up meaningfully. And so this on my sideboard in the Mirror. The seventh most popular deck is Domain Zoo. Against Domain Zoo, bring in the Portable Hold as some solid removal. Into the Floodmaw is very good if they're playing like the sideboard Rest in Peace or anything, but also it can kind of slow them down, which is kind of the name of the game. Harbinger is really solid because it can really mess up their land if they don't have a leyline draw. We're going to shave the Stern Scolding just because it doesn't hit a lot of creatures. Similarly with Spell Snare, I like keeping some number in because Nishoba Brawler, Territorial Kabu, Tribal Flame, stuff like that, but it doesn't hit like a majority of the deck like it does a lot of the decks in Modern, and they aren't really interacting with us at instant speed, and so we're going to shave on Flare of Denial, and so this is our sideboard against Domain Zoo. The eighth most popular deck is It Prowess? We're bringing in the Portable Holes, we're bringing the Stern Scoldings. Into the Floodmaw can slow stuff down as well, and it is about speed and stopping them from doing the thing. And so because it's about speed, we're going to shave on the Tameshis and then shave on the trainers, and this is how we're sideboarding against It Prowess. The ninth most popular deck is Affinity. Against Affinity, Portable Hole is pretty solid. So is Consign to Memory. I like a lot. Into the Floodmaw to return those problematic permanents. And Torpor Orb also isn't bad. Like it can stop Emery, Kappa Cannoneer, and Thought Monitor, even though Thought Monitor is often sideboarded out. We're going to take out the Stern Scolding. We're going to take out the Spell Snares. They just don't counter enough things for it to be meaningful. And weirdly enough, Disrupting Shoal just doesn't pair up well against this deck. They have a lot of zero cost stuff and a lot of big cost stuff. So it can be kind of rough. So I shaved out on the Disrupting Shoal, but this is how I sideboard against Affinity. And then lastly, the 10th most popular deck in Modern is Basking Root Brood Scale. Against Brood Scale, we're bringing in the Consigned Memories. It can counter the Fleshraker, counters the equipment, counters like all the like randoms that they're playing for Urza Saga. Speaking of Urza Saga, love Harbinger to be able to take out Urza Saga and the 2-mana lands and stuff like that. Portable Hole, obviously great against like interrupting the combo and slowing them down and stuff. Torpor Orb can stop them from like killing with Fleshraker, and then Strength Scolding counters a lot of the relevant cards in the deck. Spell Snare doesn't counter enough things. It counters Brood Scale and Malevolent Rumbles, but I just kind of don't think that's enough. They are not interacting at instant speed, so we can shave on Flare, or we can cut Flare Denial, excuse me, which means we don't have to play as many creatures. And so we're going to cut down on the creatures and then shave on a Tameshi, just because they can go kind of fast sometimes, and Tameshi can kind of sit in your hand. So this is how I sideboard against Brood Scale.
Oh, hello there. I'm glad you made it this far in the video. It probably means you're enjoying what you're watching. And I just wanted to let you know that I have a TCG Player store that funds a lot of the content that you're seeing, that in part allows me to do this full time. Because as you can see from my view count, I do not make enough money to be able to actually do this. So if these videos have helped you in any way, there's a few ways that you can support me. Beyond just like donating money, but things that you can get stuff back on. If you have cards you want to sell, then you should email me at justbottingbiz@gmail.com. Put right here. It's also in the description of every one of the videos. We can figure something out. I can make some offers. Having more inventory is super, super helpful, and you get money. And you can support me. The other way you can support me is by buying from my TCG Player store, which is also linked down below and in the link tree and all of that stuff. Link right here. You should totally check that out. I'll send you some cards, maybe write you a little note if I know that you're from the videos. That's it. Please consider it and enjoy the rest of your video.
These are the non-flex slots. These are the cards that we're not going to talk about. These are the cards that you're pretty much bought into playing if you're playing Mono Blue Belcher in Modern. These 53 cards in the main deck and these 5 cards in the sideboard. So the question is, when you decide to build Mono Blue Belcher, what 7 cards are you playing in the main deck and what 10 cards are you playing in the sideboard? These are your normal options. You pick 7 of these 13 cards for the main deck and 10 of these 26 cards for the sideboard. Let's talk about them. First off, play 2 Spell Snare. Spell Snare is a 1-mana instant counter target spell with mana value 2. This is really powerful because a lot of the more powerful decks in Modern, they're very good cards are 2 mana. Things like Psychic Frog, Ajani, Goblin Bombardment, etc., counter spell, literal counter spell. And Spell Snare deals with all of those things for just 1 mana. Strength Scolding is a 1-mana instant counter target creature spell with toughness 2 or less. You can play up to 2 of those. Strength Scolding, very good against many of the creatures that can apply pressure to you while you set up your combo. Buying Veil, you can play up to 2 Buying Veils. This is just a land. It enters tapped. However, it can buy us some more time. Creatures your opponent control get -2/-0 till end of turn. So it's a pretty decent land choice. The issue is, again, it always enters tapped. There's no option to have it enter untapped for 3 life, like a lot of the good lands, but it can buy us some time in that sense. You play up to 2 more Jwari Disruption. It's 2-mana instant counter target spell, and this controller pays 1. And land enters tapped, add a blue. Again, you play on kind of both sides situation. This is a land, again, big issue is it always enters tapped, but the effect is almost always really good. A lot of decks in Modern are tap out decks right now, and being able to actually have a 2-mana counter spell that is a little situational, but whenever your opponent taps out, you can counter that spell or just use that as a land is pretty powerful. You play a Witch Enchanter. Witch Enchanter is a 4-mana 2/2. When this creature enters, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls, or it can enter as a white land that can enter untapped for 3 life. So we do run white mana in Lotus, Bloom, and there's a white land that we play. So we can cast this card, some pretty interesting incidental artifact or enchantment hate, or again, play it as a land that can enter untapped. Waterlogged Teaching is another land option. It's 4-mana instant. Search your library for an instant card or a card with flash. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. This is really good. Like, again, we can play it as a land, which is great. But then 4 mana to be able to grab like a counter spell or a tutor effect or anything like that to either find or protect our combo can be really, really good. You play a Tezzeret the Seeker is a 5-mana planeswalker. Plus 1 is untapped up to 2 artifacts. -X, search your library for an artifact card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And -5 is artifacts you control become artifact creatures with base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. The reason we would play this card is essentially just a tutor Charbelcher. We can play it immediately -4, Tezzeret dies, but then we can put Belcher on the battlefield. 5 mana is a lot though, so that can be kind of tough, but it's a great way to just like run a 5th Belcher that just costs 1 more mana. And we play Commandeer. Commandeer is a 7 mana instant. However, you can exile 2 blue cards from your hand rather than play the spell's mana cost, and you gain control of target non-creature spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is a pretty decent spell that can effectively be free in this deck for non-creature spells we care about. Amazing in the mirror. It's very good against counter magic, you know, when we're trying to combo, all that stuff. So you're going to be selecting 7 of these 13 cards to play in your main deck. And then as far as the sideboard goes, you can play Portable Hole. Portable Hole is a 1 mana artifact. When this artifact enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value 2 or less until this artifact leaves the battlefield. We'd play this just to tutor with Whir of Invention, but really decent thing that we can tutor up that can get rid of really small stuff. We play Pact of Negation, a 0 mana instant, counter target spell. However, at the beginning of your next upkeep, pay 5. If you don't, you lose the game. So this is kind of if we want to go all in on our combo against counterspell decks. You know, it can really just like go to combo, protect it with Pact, we win. You can play the 4th Consign. Consign is a 1 mana instant with replicate 1 counter target triggered ability or colorless spell. Very good against Eldrazi, pretty decent in the mirror, really good against Storm, decent against Amulet. You know, there's all these decks that have triggered abilities or just play a bunch of colorless stuff that we would love Consign against. You can play Flusterstorm. Flusterstorm is a 1 mana instant, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless this controller pays 1. And it has Storm. Obviously, it's good against Storm, but also really decent in fighting counter wars, you know, kind of like just as a counter all situation. Play up to 4 into the Floodmaw. Into the Floodmaw is a 1 mana instant. Gift a tapped fish. Return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. If a gift was promised, instead return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. This is very powerful against hate like Stony Silence and different effects like that, while also buying you time against creatures. We already talked about Skirn Scolding, but you can play up to 3 in the board for those creatures. You play up to 2 Unable to Scream. Unable to Scream is a 1 mana enchantment. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature loses all abilities and is a toy artifact creature with base power of toughness 0/2 in addition to its other types. As long as enchanted creature is face down, it can't be turned face up. It's really good to kind of get rid of creatures that are very powerful, can neuter our deck, maybe are core to your opponent's strategy, etc., etc. You can play Mystical Dispute. It's a 3 mana instant, however it costs 2 less. If it targets a blue spell, counter target spell, and this controller pays 3. Very good about winning counter wars, you know, just for 1 mana against these blue decks. You can play Stock Up. Stock Up, 3 mana sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Put 2 of them in your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. Really good against decks that are decent at playing the long game with us, about answering our initial combo, and decks that we really just need to be loaded up with counter magic in order to beat. Play 2 Pact of Negation in the board. This is a 3 mana instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Counter target non-creature spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it to its owner's graveyard. This is very good when we're attempting to whir at the end of our opponent's turn. We can protect that whir into Goblin Charbelcher. Also really good against combo decks and other things that we like very much need to make sure that our opponents can't do. You play 2 more Harbinger of the Seas, a 3 mana 2/2. Non-basic lands are islands. Very good against decks that rely on their lands for, you know, for doing their stuff, you know, like Eldrazi and Amulet Titan, and decks that are really greedy with their lands. You can play that Tezzeret the Seeker in the sideboard if you feel like you need that 5th Goblin Charbelcher to tutor out. Commandeer, we've already talked about why you'd play that. You can also do it in the sideboard. You can play a Displacement Wave. It is blue X sorcery. Return all non-land permanents with mana value X or less to their owner's hands. Very good against hate. Very good against these like small creature decks to buy you a ton of time. You can also play a basic land in the board. Most of them play either one of these. The reason you'd play the Mountain is because when you activate Goblin Charbelcher, it'll stop when it hits this land. And sometimes it'll be pretty early in the deck, and Goblin Charbelcher says that if it's a mountain that you reveal, it deals double the amount of cards that are revealed off of your deck. The issue is mountain casts 0 cards on her deck, so that's kind of awkward. Island wouldn't deal double, but if you like draw the island, you can actually cast spells off of it. And they can play a single Tormod's Crypt. We can tutor it up with War of Invention, which is awesome. A 0-mana artifact, tap it to sacrifice a side effect, exile target player's graveyard. Very good against graveyard decks, and we can tutor it at instant speed, which is pretty cool. So you're going to be selecting 10 of these 26 cards to add to your sideboard, and 7 of these 13 cards to add to your main deck, and then you have your very own but stock version of Mono Blue Belcher in Modern. First off, the MDFC lands, which is, your mana base, can be used in certain situations. Specifically, Baeen Veil is a great fog against energy. Shwari Disruption is just like Force Spike, which is really good if they're tapping out, obviously. Suppression Ray doesn't come up, like, to speak of. Hydroelectric Specimen can target cards like Lightning Bolt and can also, like, flash in and block. Seagate Restoration doesn't come up a lot, but if the game goes really, really long, or you have, like, a powerful Lotus Bloom draw, casting Seagate Restoration can happen. Sink into Stupor is, by a lot, your best spell land, and can answer threats and hate on the board and on the stack. In addition, Disrupting Shoal is a really difficult card to play with, and it's really important that you keep a card in your hand that is the same mana cost as a spell you want to interact with, and just knowing your opponent's deck and knowing how your opponent is interacting with you is really important. If you're reading Consigned to Memory or it's post board against a blue deck and you know they bring in Consigned to Memory, remember War of Invention is a great way to get Belcher in play around Consign. Remember when you're doing a Tameshi combo or you're working with Tameshi, remember the draw trigger works not only for your own stuff but also your opponent's stuff being bounced, which matters with Sink into Stupor. And there's a lot more cards Tameshi can return in post-board games, like Tormod's Crypt or Damping Sphere, or like other artifacts that you might be bringing in. Also, speaking of War of Invention, you can overpay for War of Invention, so you can kind of hide what you're searching for. Remember with Philagi Archaeologists, you can choose to take nothing if stats are important and you need to make sure that you can block. And lastly, if you're pretty sure you're playing against a Silence or an Orange Chant deck, it's important to not exile 2 Lotus Blooms in the same turn, so they can't just like 2-for-1 you. It's just them doing it to one of them sucks, but doing it to 2 would be miserable. If you like that video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.